You ever prayed for something that wasn't selfish, it wasn't sinful, and still felt like God said no? I think that's one of the hardest parts of following Him, not waiting, not suffering, but trusting His heart when His answer is still the no. In this week's Torah portion, Ve'et Kanan, it gives us one of the most emotional moments in Moses' life. After leading Israel for 40 years, he stands on the edge of the promised land and pleads with God, "Please let me cross over." And unfortunately, God says no. If anyone deserved to enter the land, you'd think it would be Moses. He faced Pharaoh, led Israel through the sea, he received the Torah and endured decades of complaining. Yet God still refused his request. This really challenged me. And I think sometimes we assume that if we're faithful enough, obedient enough, or we pray hard enough, God owes us the answer that we want. We may never say that out loud, but disappointment can reveal that's what we believe. So maybe you've prayed for healing, restoration, a new job, a loved one, and the answer wasn't what you hoped for. Here's what I love about this passage, though, that God's answer did not change God's love. Moses was still called God's faithful servant. God was still with him. In fact, God himself buried Moses. He wasn't rejected. One request was denied, but the relationship never ever changed. Sometimes we confuse God's answer with God's character. We don't always understand why God says no, but we can trust that he sees what we cannot. I've looked back on prayers that went unanswered and realized that they were actually acts of God's protection and wisdom in my life. Then God tells Moses something remarkable. Encourage Joshua. Moses doesn't become bitter. He doesn't quit. He invests in the next generation. And that's what mature faith looks like. It's trusting God even when we don't understand him. And here's the beautiful ending to this. Moses thought he'd never stand in the promised land. Yet, centuries later, he appears with Yeshua on the Mount of Transfiguration. God's no wasn't the end of the story. It wasn't his timing. If you're carrying an unanswered prayer today, remember this. Don't measure God's love by his answer. Measure it by his character. Sometimes the greatest act of faith isn't believing God can. It's trusting that he's still good, even when the answer is no.